Thanks for listening to Creative Control. While I have you here, please consider supporting Youth Empowerment and Support Services, otherwise known as YES. Based in Edmonton, Alberta, YES provides immediate and low-barrier overnight and day shelter, temporary supportive housing, and individualized wraparound supports for young people aged 15 to 24. They work collaboratively within a network of care focused on the prevention of youth homelessness by providing youth with the necessary supports to stabilize their housing, improve their well-being, build life skills, connect with community, and avoid re-entry into homelessness. Learn more about how to donate or otherwise support YES by visiting yess.org.
Hey, this is Trevor from Halifax, calling in to say that I support Creative Control on Patreon because I think long-form arts journalism is a crucial part of music culture, and there's simply not enough of it out there today. Vish is a master interviewer, he lands great guests, and he has his finger on the pulse of the ever-changing music landscape, both here in Canada and abroad. For all of these reasons and many more, I think you should support Creative Control on Patreon too.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control today. I'm Visha's wife, and I will love him no matter what you do. And now he has me on the record saying that. Creative Control with Vish Khanna.
Mark Davidson and Parker Fishel are both American archivists and music historians based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Chicago, Illinois, respectively. Davidson is the curator of the Bob Dylan Archive and the director of archives and exhibitions for the Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie Centers, which are each located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Fishel served as the co-curator of the inaugural exhibitions at the Bob Dylan Center, and he runs Americana Music Productions, which provides consulting, research, and production work for artists, estates, record labels, and others who wish to preserve and share historical archives and artifacts. Together, they've edited a new book called Bob Dylan, Mixing Up the Medicine, which was published by Callaway Arts and Entertainment on October 24th, 2023, and covers Dylan's entire life and career to date, and features over 1,100 images, including handwritten lyrics, manuscripts, and other rare or previously unseen works by Dylan, plus 30 fresh essays by notable musicians, scholars, journalists, and writers. As such, Mark and Parker have returned to the show for a wide-ranging talk about this essential new book, some of the fascinating essays by notable contributors, some of whom seem particularly interested in Dylan's lesser-known periods, the clamoring for mythical recordings by the likes of Dylan, Charlie Parker, and Fugazi, why I think Bob Dylan is trying to tell us he's very close to retiring, the latest on the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa, other future plans, and much more. A part of the Entertainment One Network with the support of listeners just like you who follow and subscribe to this donor-driven podcast and spread the word about it, and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control. That is the primary source of revenue for this show, and I'm trying, as always, to raise the monthly level of support. So if you want to contribute to that, it's most appreciated. You can sign up for an annual donation, or you can sign up for monthly donations, and you can change the amounts anytime you want. It's just that simple. So please click on the link in the show notes and visit the Creative Control Patreon, and if you can, support this show today. Thank you very much. With additional support from Blackbird Music, a wonderful record store with bricks and mortar locations in Edmonton and Calgary, Alberta, and a really great website where you can order records and things for yourself. If you want to order any music by Bob Dylan, I'm sure they've got it for you. Just go to blackbird.ca, type in what you want, and if they can get it to your house, if you can't make it into their stores, you never know what's going to happen. I think it's possible. Find out at blackbird.ca. Plus, in-kind support from Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Ontario, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario, each of which are wonderful, independently run businesses. This is episode 828 of Creative Control, featuring the lovely and talented Mark Davidson and Parker Fishel, with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Great. How are you doing, Vish?
Oh, I'm great today. It's nice to see you again. Where in the world are you today?
I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Beautiful Tulsa.
Nice. I've been there once, as you know, and I enjoyed it very much. How are things going in Tulsa generally?
Generally, they're going quite well. Quite well. Bob Dylan Center, Woody Guthrie Center, both wrapping up the year, making our plans for next year. It's a good time.
That's lovely to hear, Mark. Thank you again for being on the show. And Parker, how's it going there?
Good. Good morning, Vish. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I'm full of pancakes and good cheer. It is a beautiful day here in Edmonton. And well, it's overcast, to be honest with you, but the pancakes make it feel like the sun is out. You know what I'm saying?
That's great. Yeah, that's the way to start the day. What kind of pancakes did you make?
Today I made, well, everyone has a different order. So my daughter, Ramona, requested a Nutella pancake. So it's a pancake and I do a swirl of Nutella. Like I have to, it's really awkward. Have you ever experienced the Nutella? It's very thick. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yes, I'm nodding. You can, all your listeners can hear me nodding.
Perfect.
Yes.
It is called, they are called nodcasts. Anyway, so I drip that. I do my best to drip that on there. And then for my son and my wife, they like, I do a blueberry, lemon zest, cinnamon. They enjoy that. And then I also now have taken up chocolate chip and peanut butter chip pancakes. And then I heat up the syrup and we had some whipped cream. That was delicious. Some coffee. It was great.
I'm going to Google the drive time between Edmonton and Tulsa. I'm going to make it by next Sunday.
To be honest with you, we'll talk about this. Reading your new book, I want to get back to Tulsa. I feel reading this book that I didn't take full advantage of my time at the Bob Dylan Center, and I want to talk to you about that because I already have like a envy. And I was there. I've been there, and you showed me some great stuff. But I'm like, oh my God, we'll get into that in a moment. But sorry, Parker, where in the world are you?
Chicago, Illinois.
Chicago? I wasn't expecting you to say that. Did you? How long have you been there?
Between the time we last spoke and the time we're speaking now. Yeah, last August, I guess.
Wow.
So summer. Moved from Brooklyn, New York, after many, many years to Chicago.
Oh.
So,
well,
yeah,
Chicago.
I've got a basement, and I'm in it. It's full of records.
I see that. I can see that on my screen, if I may, and we don't have to get too far into it. But why the move from Brooklyn to Chicago?
The pandemic just made life in New York a little crazy, and had a young child, which made it sort of even crazier. And I have retired in-laws here in Chicago who are very helpful. So that's why we're here.
Sort of family reasons. Well, if for what it's worth, I think Chicago is a wonderful city. I have guests from Chicago on the show frequently. I love that city. So are you enjoying it so far?
Oh, it's been great. Maybe I'm still in the honeymoon period, but just getting to explore a new city. And the music scene, I wasn't expecting it to be quite so vibrant as it is, from garage bands to experimental jazz and, everything in between. There's always something to do. So it's been great. Yeah.
Oh, good for you. Well, that's wonderful. I love that city. Okay, well, cool. It's good to have you back on the show as well. And I think, let's see here. I wonder if Chicago, in terms of pancake time, I don't know if Chicago is actually closer than Tulsa from Edmonton, but we'll figure it out. I'll figure out a way to get you guys. What I'm saying is, you bring me back to Tulsa, we're all there, I'm making you pancakes. That's how it's going to work. If you enjoy it.
Outstanding. Or I am also from Chicago and still have family and friends up there, so we could meet in Chicago. I would be more than happy to do so.
Split the difference.
Okay.
You'll bring some of the manuscripts with you, though,
yes.
Mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
I always have them in my backpack.
So this is a nice segue into this wonderful book that you two have edited. And it reflects the Bob Dylan Center, which in a beautiful way. Let's talk about the origin of this book. And by the way, I will also say, I feel like you were holding out on me. You were likely working on this book when we first met, and you didn't say anything. You didn't spill any beans. It's amazing. Mark, tell us about the origin of this wonderful new book.
Yes, of course. We were indeed working on it at the time that the center opened in May of 2022 when you came to see us. Actually, we took a few-week break, I think, before we really got back into it. But it started because the first curator of the Bob Dylan archive, Michael Chaikin, who was involved in getting the archive to Tulsa, came in 2016. Shortly after the archive came, he started bringing people down to Tulsa to check out the archive, to do a public program, and just to get a sense of what was going on in Tulsa. Michael Chaikin and his colleague Robert Polito, who's a poet and a professor at the New School in New York. So between, I don't know, early 2017 and the pandemic, we had dozens of people come down, do a public program. They would go through the archive, choose a piece that they liked, that intrigued them, and they started writing essays. And the last event that we did, actually, it was right after we learned that South by Southwest had been canceled in March of 2020. It was a general feeling of what's about to hit us. And we had Lucy Sant out at a dive bar, wonderful dive bar here called the Cellar Dweller, reading from her previous books. And she ended up writing a very wonderful essay, specifically a 1964 notebook with some tie-ins to some other notebooks. But that's basically how it started.
Yeah. So, Parker, can you speak to this wonderful notion of bringing people into Tulsa and to the archive to actually home in on pieces that spoke to them? Or I guess to follow up on what Mark's saying, I gather from these essays by these people that they may have come in wondering about a song or wondering about an era that spoke to them already. And they'd say, hey, can you get me a box full of Dignity? I want to know more about Dignity, the song Dignity, where the origins are. Can you speak to that impulse of bringing people in to do this kind of investigation? Because it's a really fascinating one. And hearing people say, like, I donned white gloves to touch these mylar encased archives, but still, like, through the white gloves, the spark of inspiration. And, all of it's just wonderfully written. And I really appreciate it. I feel like I'm there with them. Long-winded way of saying, again, Parker, can you speak to that impulse of asking people to come down, dig into the archives, and then write about it?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't there on the ground when folks were coming through. Mark was really the one sort of shepherding them through the collection. I just feel like requests like, do you know of anything that pertains to, because everybody has their list of top 10 Dylan songs, albums, whatever. And we all probably have overlaps within our idiosyncrasies as well. But I think it's the first time you see some of this stuff. It's just like, wow, that is part of this process that led to this thing that's made, this sort of indelible mark, left an indelible mark in my life and my psyche. And I don't know, Mark, do you want to speak to it a little bit? I know it was posed to me, but you were sort of there to gauge people's reactions as they were actually, seeing this stuff and going through the boxes.
Yeah, I will ask Vish two questions.
Yes.
One, what period do you think most people wanted to look at and write about? And two, what would you want to look at and write about?
These are good questions. Well, given the intergenerational aspect of the makeup of the contributors, it's hard to say. And I've read the book, so I know that for each sort of era of Dylan's career, you have people writing essays about things. I'm just trying to, I'm stalling to answer your question. So I'm just thinking here. I like to be right. You see what I'm saying? I would think the 60s in general, maybe the late 60s, maybe that in-between period, maybe the motorcycle accident to the return. I would guess that was a key point of entry for many people. And then for me, as you both know, I'm a tremendous fan of the band Fugazi. And when people say, well, what's your favorite time? Obviously the first releases are so key. And I'm like, well, actually, when I started to see them around their album End Hits, That's when I felt really immersed. So sometime around 98, well, about 10 years into their existence, they say, 10 years? What are you talking about? The Kill Taker, Repeater, those are the... I'm like, yeah, they're great. And they do speak to me. I love them as records, but I didn't get to immerse myself. So for Dylan, I started seeing him in the late 90s. And he was a figure that had been in every Beatles book I read. The Beastie Boys would sample him. He was in the culture. I would borrow greatest hits records from the library, and I could recognize the greatness of those songs, but I didn't dig in until Time Out of Mind. I got Time Out of Mind from the University of Guelph School newspaper as a review copy, and I was like, I know this guy. Put it on, I was like, what the hell is this? Oh my God, it just instantly spoke to me, and I don't know what that says about me as a 20-year-old, 19-year-old, whatever I was, but it just got to me, and then I went to the record store and I bought a used copy of John Wesley Harding. I'm like, oh my God! What is this? Listen to this band. So then I started to see him. So for me, it is not just Time Out of Mind era for me, but that is what the gateway to my Dylan fanaticism was that confluence of events. So Mark, again, I apologize for being long-winded. To answer your question, it is that era, but I have a soft spot for John Wesley Harding. I have a soft spot for all sorts of things with him, but I would say Time Out of Mind onward is my entry point, and so that to me is where I would want to start. That's where I'd want to dig in. That's why Fragments, the recent bootleg series, excited me so much. Whereas some of my friends were like, "Yeah, I know you like that one. Does it grab me? I don't know, get it. It grabs some of you guys." And my friend said that to me. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, except I have a sentimental attachment to it, and I think it's great. So, Mark. Those are my responses. How did I fare?
Great. That was the era that you would want to write about is a very rich era in the archive. And it may be worthwhile to say that the archive begins around the notebook that Lucy Sant was writing about in 1964, Chimes of Freedom lyrics, but really it takes off in the mid-60s materials and it runs through 2012 with Tempest, which was the last album of original material that Bob had done when the archive was sold.
Right.
So that's kind of the range, and the Time Out of Mind, that late 90s, early to mid 2000s are really well represented. For whatever reason, as we were parceling out the essays into the 9 eras that we chose, that we kind of discussed, fought over, chose a lot from the mid 80s. A lot of people wanted to write about the mid 80s, and that was maybe surprising to us, because you would think somebody would come in and go, "Gosh, I want to write about Like a Rolling Stone or Subterranean Homesick Blues or something like that." So it was just I think it was a period that people wanted to dig into and kind of reappraise.
Huh.
And I also think that some people wanted to, Larry Sloman, Under the Red Sky, Handy Dandy, to try to reshape some of the narratives around some of the more maligned albums.
Yeah, and that's a really fascinating take by Larry to go after and get into and reappraise things like that. There's a reappraisal of Ronaldo and Clara. There. I just did this with the Budokan set, where I was like, yeah, this is really malign, but as I dig into this version, I can appreciate it more. By the way, I just want to correct myself. First time I saw Fugazi, Red Medicine Tour, 1995. But, and that...
the record show.
Bone Student Center, Normal, Illinois, when I was at Illinois State University, fall of 1993, and on the Kill Taker, and it was maybe the most, $5, most influential, impactful show of my life to date.
Yeah. I just wanted to correct the record because I may have intimated that I didn't see them till 98, but I'm just saying, a contemporary experience with an artist. Do you guys, like, Parker, does that make sense that you...
Yeah, entirely.
The entry point you had to immerse yourself, and there's something about seeing them live, too. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, totally. I had a similar... It's not the first time I've seen them, but I had a similar experience seeing Wilco, like, a month ago. End of the tour, or their tour for this new record. And I'd listened to it, but hadn't really gotten into it. And then seen it live, I went back and listened. I was like, oh, all the subtlety, all the nuance, I could pick up on that much more and had a much different, relationship to that record. So totally understand what you're, how that works.
Yeah, it is. It's just a thing where situationally where you are in an artist's trajectory is going to create a bond with you and that artist that some people won't. You guys have, Mark, that's so fascinating. So you're saying the mid 80s was a frequent era that people wanted to learn about? And to me, I said it to Ray Padgett recently, like that's kind of my biggest blind spot because of the sonic qualities of the records. It's not the songwriting, it's just something about it. It wasn't until this bootleg series, Springtime in New York, that covers 1980 to 1985, where I dug back in. I'm like, wait a minute. These are incredible songs. Like, these are incredible performances. Sorry. Mark, are you pointing this out because you mentioned they're maligned? It's not considered the most fruitful or popular era of Dylan. Is that a safe thing to say?
Absolutely. I think, yeah. And I don't know that the folks writing about that era were doing it to be contrarian. It may be, I'm trying to think of who it was and their approximate age and Brownsville Girl or,
Infidels.
Infidels. Yeah. I don't know. It may have been in entry point for some of these folks as well. But it was a rich, time to mine in the archive.
It's also a really rich period, like in the archive, which is why it's one of the the publisher was like, did you realize that this is if not the largest chapter in the book, the largest chapter in the book is devoted to basically like the 80s, this sort of, period of wanderings or experimentation or whatever you want to however you want to frame it. But I also think, it was driven somewhat by the materials that are there because there's just so much. Because, for like you saw in Springtime in New York, an album like Empire Burlesque is recorded over X number of sessions in 2 cities and these different studios with these different musicians, and only a small fraction of that is making the cut. So you have the ability to sort of zoom out and tell a larger story. And then also probably there's a bit of like, I feel an attachment to the 60s and the 70s because that is the Dylan that so many people think of. But, maybe they felt like there was less new, they didn't have an angle. They wanted to say something new and they didn't, have something new to add to that.
Well, but I also...
is the only other thing I can...
No, that makes sense to me. But also, Parker, like, it is probably the only, like the early to mid to late 80s, it's one of the only periods in his career where Dylan has sort of admitted he didn't know what he was doing. So do you know what I mean by that? He sort of said, I was lost. I didn't know what to do. And that followed one of his boldest periods with the gospel era, where he was so resolute in what he was believing. And I think that's what those of us who followed his career and his work, one of the things that resonates with us is his confidence, his boldness. So I wonder if people are like, why was he so full of self-doubt? What was actually going on? Does that make sense to you, Parker?
Yeah.
Because it's a mysterious, like, how is this guy who's normally like really high level suddenly faltering? Like, Mark, do you feel like that is a part of the narrative of that chapter? Like the fact that so many people want to focus on this strange time, probably the strangest time in his trajectory?
I think that there's a parallel thing happening at this very moment, because it's within months of the release of, Biograph comes out.
Oh, right.
And
the overview. Yeah.
And sort of for the first time, people are getting a box set in the sort of CD era, compact disc era, not CD, SEEDY, but of a lot of outtakes, unreleased material. That's a moment when, as we know, MTV has sort of taken over the music industry, the mainstream music industry. And it was a time when the compact disc had just become the format of record, no pun intended. And everybody from, the boomers were rebuying their entire catalogs on compact disc. So Biograph was a really important, I think, moment for the kind of archival release market. And then the bootleg series in 1991. So you have, what we may think of as a period of time where Dylan is maybe trying to figure things out again, figure out where he's at, leading to, I think, the late 90s Time Out of Mind era, 97. So all of these old releases are coming out, the bootleg series coming out. He starts going back to the well with Good As I Been to You and World Gone Wrong, and all these things are happening at once. Yeah. And that's a recurring narrative throughout the book is that moment of pause and kind of reevaluation, it seems, for Dylan before these sort of creative explosions that, we've just witnessed another recently with Rough and Rowdy Ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to hear, as much as I was earlier talking about the kind of perception of weakness, there's so much stuff in this book. Did I congratulate you guys on this book? Congratulations on this book. I learned a lot from it. And there's just so much sort of information going by that I've downloaded as much as I can. But at one point, there's a note that Dylan thinks of Shot of Love as his favorite album. Am I getting that correct? Like, that's maybe his favorite record?
Yeah, and actually that, in the initial draft, that was kind of, it's from an interview that he did somewhere. And in the initial draft of the book, it was actually expanded because his comments to the interviewer were drafted out in advance on a hotel stationery. And so he kind of has a longer sort of and slightly different explanation of that album. So we wanted to use that just for space considerations. We couldn't. And it's like, but yeah, he felt Shot of Love was like, where he was at that moment.
Yeah. I wonder if his mind has changed. Because a part of me, when I read that, he was in a week. I think we've learned from Chronicles and his other sort of interviews that he does view this period as one of searching and uncertainty for him artistically. So part of me was like, maybe he's overcompensating or something. Like maybe he's trying to, create some hype about something for his own benefit. But that's just pure speculation on my part. Anyway, it's really fascinating. I want to take us back to my time with you in Tulsa for a moment. And here's where I think I earlier alluded to some regret. You guys did a thing for me, which I appreciated, which was you brought me up to a room and you said, hey, look, notebooks, sheets of paper. And what do you remember what you showed me, Mark? Do you remember what kind of stuff you had shown me? I know you were bringing lots of people through, but
Parker, do you happen to? I mean, we had some things that we were showing.
It was a lot of the because I remember we finished and you said, "Oh, we've got to put all of those in the book." So it was a lot of the.
Did I say that? Who said that?
No, Mark.
Oh, Mark. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah. No,
I didn't know about the book.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm not involved in the book. I wish I was involved in the book, but I'm not involved in the book. It's a beautiful book. Yeah, maybe the next one. Sorry, go ahead.
It was a lot of the Bring It All Back Home, Highway 61 stuff. So like Ballad of a Thin Man, Bob Dylan's 115th Dream.
There was Dignity as well. There was like 20 or 30 pages of Dignity or something.
Dignity. It was the late 1960s little notebook with the lyrics to You Belong to Me and some of the John Wesley Harding drafts, I believe. I'm trying to think what else.
Well, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. Where I was getting at, I feel like I think I was a bit stunned. Do you have any recollection of my reaction to this? Because I feel like I was just like, what is this? I don't remember exactly, but I feel like I didn't appreciate it enough because I was so stunned. But do you have any recall of how I was reacting to what I was seeing?
Not you in particular, but that was people's general, reaction was like, that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
As much as the center is not about fetishizing the object, that's the draft for Subterranean Homesick Blues or one of the two, right? That's it,
That's stunning. And not everyone gets to sort of see and touch these things, right? Like the people that you brought down to Tulsa before the center opened, they felt, I don't want to say they felt special, but they realized, no, yeah, let's just go that route. They realized this was rarefied air and tangible object stuff they were exposed to, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny because there have been so many moments, because I've had to drag the stuff out on so many occasions for a lot of different people. We had and we still do, a very strict no photography policy around any of the Dylan manuscripts or the materials. And I remember the mayor of Tulsa, I had just moved there. I didn't know him from, Adam. And
sure,
he wanted to take a photo with Bruce Langhorne's tambourine. And I told him no. And it was maybe the most unintentionally punk rock I've ever been in my life. Telling the mayor of the city I live in that he can't take a photo with a tambourine. But I often, there are moments where I'll be putting the manuscripts out, and I'll suddenly have that realization again that I'm not just sort of, that what I'm holding in my hands is, the draft for Subterranean Homesick Blues, or any number of these things, these really incredible pieces. And Parker mentioned it, we're not a mall restaurant, we're not guitars on walls, or it's not, wall power, as some folks refer to it, is important, but it is not the only thing. The context around the objects and sort of telling maybe a bigger story.
Well,
yeah.
I was just going to say, Mark, that I think it's the context, particularly because of the type of artist that Dylan is, right? Like, I'm sure we told you as we did the spiel for you, the Dog and Pony Show, as we did for everyone. And as we've tried to, impart in the book, which is that, Dylan writes all this stuff to get like a draft, right, of a song that then he says, okay, this is a song that I can, perform live, take into a studio, most likely. And in there, as many of us who, have followed the bootleg series, we see that it can go through many twists and turns. Sometimes, it goes through many twists and turns and it hits the cutting room floor, like Blind Willie McTell or Dignity. And, we only get to see what, it could have been, or where it was at all these years later. And then once there's the version on the album, that version, is soon going to find, if it ends up on the live stage, whether immediately after 40 years down the line, it's going to, take on sort of new dimensions. And so I think that's like a easy way to say, like, the object is important, right? Like Lee Ranaldo's essay that starts off the book, like, the object is important. We can't have the song without really this piece of paper that has all the words to it. But that, it doesn't end there. Dylan's, words, exist in song, as he sort of said in the Nobel lecture, right?
Well, I can't recall who exactly said this. Maybe it might have been Mike Campbell or someone from Tom Petty's band. And forgive me if this is wrong. Maybe one of you can correct me. But one of them talks about how in working with Dylan, they discovered that he will, even if a song ends up with 6 verses, he'll write 20. And he'll just keep writing and writing and writing and writing. And then he'll figure out in the studio which ones make the most sense. This is just an insight I wasn't totally aware of, that he would, except that when you brought me into that room and showed me, how many pages of Dignity is it? I've been telling people it's like 20, 30 pages. Am I crazy? What?
I think it's like 43, maybe.
Yeah.
It's somewhere around that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and this is a very bizarre sort of situation. There's a guy who's known for his precision, but he's also a very private guy. And what your archive does, and what this book does, and what's been happening with the bootleg series, is the privacy is gone. The process is revealed. The flaws, if you will, the practice is revealed. Mark, what do you make of that? What do you make of the fact that I do think he's mysterious, enigmatic, but he's also been very, in this work that you guys are doing in the bootleg series, which I view as both a way of creating or dispelling maybe some mystery for hardcore fans. It also shows him to be human. Like, I find like all of this is a very humanizing thing to allow your work to, you know, to have an archive like this. And like, look, I didn't know what I was doing really on some level. I wrote 20, 30, 45 pages of a song that didn't make it. Can you explain that sort of tension between him being enigmatic and him being completely open with the work you guys are doing?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for humans, but I can speak for Bob, I think. I can't speak for Bob either, but just recently, last weekend, one of the things in our book is the multiplicity of voices that we try to bring to it. You know, essayists, certainly quotations throughout the book, our own voices, which we try to be pretty neutral with. But there are a lot of outtakes of interviews from No Direction Home in particular that are part of the archive. And I was listening to some of those interviews, and Bob said he was talking about writing and in Desolation Row in particular. And he basically said, once I got that form down, I could just write and write and write and write and write. It's effortless at that point. And I think that's a really important point, that once he's locked into that, you know, he's sort of meditated his way into a particular form, he can write and write and write and write. I mean, it just comes out. I'm working on an exhibit right now, 61 to 64, and I've been focusing on some of the early ballads, Death of Emmett Till in particular, and it's really interesting for a song that early on to look at it and go, he's close to getting the ballad form down, but he hasn't gotten it yet. Mm-hmm. And just in a year or two, like it's locked in. He's nailed it down, and it's really, really incredible watching that trajectory for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Parker, one of the bits from the book that resonated with me is an exchange that I think Allen Ginsberg has with. Sorry, guys, I didn't make any notes. Your book's too dense. I just thought I'd go by my memory. I apologize. But Allen Ginsberg and someone are having a discussion about Dylan's songs. And
Robert Greil.
Was it Greil? Okay.
I think it's Greil, yeah.
Do you know what I'm going to talk about? I was going to mention the fact that Ginsberg suggests that every song Dylan writes is actually autobiographical. And I don't remember who paraphrases. Oh, now you're going to pull out the book like it's a textbook? Look at you. This is great.
Yeah,
I can't recall off the top.
If I got to give you a good answer.
No, what I'm getting at is, if Ginsberg is correct, if that's true, does that give you any particular perspective on everything you're encountering in this archive? Like, yes, we know this is coming from this guy, but if the notion that maybe it's Sloman talking to Ginsberg actually about Handy Dandy, which Sloman...
That sounds...
Yeah, Larry argues in that song that, you know, as much as that album might be maligned or the songs are thought to be shoddy in terms of their craft, maybe we need to take a second look at what Dylan was actually saying on those records, right? So for him, he argues Handy Dandy is probably him. It's probably that character, Handy Dandy, is Dylan. Anyway, sorry, if Ginsberg's assertion is correct, that almost everything is autobiographical, does that give you pause as you ponder and hold these things in your hands and think about the material that this guy who is shrouded in mystery is actually telling us about himself every time? Has that occurred to you?
I'm gonna bracket my answer first to say the Robert Greil thing is they're talking about what Dylan's best line is. Oh. And Dylan, at the time, offers that it's to live outside the law, you must be honest.
To live outside the law, you must be honest.
So, just so we get that on the record.
I saw Fugazi first time, 1995. Allen Ginsberg was talking to Robert Greil about, we're just... This
but no, I think it's like what we found in the book is that so often there are a couple dimensions. I'll say that, like, when we're talking about, like, you know, writing 25 verses for a 6-verse song, it's like that is something that, you know, whether it is a masterwork or what we consider a masterwork, right, like Dignity or something like that, or whether it is, you know, like there are 3 surviving drafts of Wiggle Wiggle, which on many critics' lists, ranks pretty low. But, I think that just shows the seriousness to which Dylan, goes into everything. And something you hear in the bootleg series, like how many other artists like just could release their rehearsals and they're singing as if they're on stage for, thousands of people. It's like he plays for keeps, and you don't go into, making an album saying this is going to be my minor work, right? No, it's like I'm making the next, thing. And Dylan certainly has a strange relationship or an unorthodox relationship with maybe the recording, the act of recording or the recording studio, because like, I think, as we've seen with his touring over the past 30 whatever years, that's the arena for him that things really seem to come alive. But one thing we found in answering your actual question was that so often Dylan has sort of told us the truth, As fans, we choose to create a lot of mystery around some things that he's been pretty upfront about, mostly because sometimes he hasn't been so upfront about other things, right? Like from the moment of arriving in New York City with sort of this backstory that's, largely, fact and fiction and playing fast and loose. But, so often, there is a hint of whether it's autobiography or sort of like truth telling or whatever it is, there it is. That's why I think, like even just things in the book where he's the music hairs, right? Speech where he's like, if you sang Key to the Highway as much as me, you could write Highway 61, right? Like revisited, right? Like, and that's why we use that quote. It's like, he's told you this is the equivalency. But I think that, what that means when we're holding things in our hands, I try not to read too much into it. Right. Yeah. And that was sort of Mark and my goal as editors of the book was, and to let other voices who are more knowledgeable or to kind of like present our role as like sort of editors, archivists, or to like present all the evidence and let people sort of make of it what they will.
It's funny to hear anyone talk about Bob Dylan in this sort of scholarly realm that we're borderline on and say, I try not to read too much into it. That seems to be the whole thing with us, isn't it?
That is, and that's part of like the fun of being a fan, right?
Yeah.
But it felt like I didn't want to. The point of the book was not for me and Mark to like take our opinions about these things and make them sort of the official opinion. Like I'd much rather, like we did in Newport, like just present like here's all the interviews from No Direction Home. Here's rather than Mark and I who were not we were not born when this all took place. Here's people who are actually there talking about it, like 10 of them, and weaving that together. And like, what you get is something that is an account of Dylan going electric at quote unquote at Newport. That is like all the events don't quite like all the opinions don't quite line up, but they don't not line up either. And like, you can kind of start to see, what that day might have been like through it. So, well, that's
in pondering this fellow and the events and things like in his life and the things he's done. I don't think it's being melodramatic to say that there's a conspiratorial tone to the way people process everything. And I think as things have gotten released via the bootleg series or No Direction Home or the DVD release of that festival film by Marie Lerner, is that correct? Am I saying? Yeah. Those are all like, for me anyway, encountering those things, the footage at Newport, every few years something is released. We're like, oh, they have it. Like someone has this thing we've heard about, or I just have never seen this before or heard this before. I can't think of any other artist, Mark, where the fan base is sort of accustomed to wanting and clamoring for things that suddenly appear on the internet or in the archive now. That's a weird thing. I can't think of anyone else. So I have a twofold question for you, Mark. I just wanted to say that because it's just been on my mind. Like just this constant, every few years, a revelatory thing comes out with this guy. But my question for you, Mark, is twofold. One, are you ever not astonished by what you encounter in the archive? Whether someone's asked you to pull something up or whatever, like, does the novelty of like, holy shit, ever leave you? And secondly, was there anything in these essays that people wrote, these wonderful essays, that surprised you, gave you insight? Does anything in particular come to mind? Can you speak to those two? I'm asking you about your general sense of astonishment when it comes to some of the materials that you live with at the center, and also from the perspective of those who got to access them. Can you speak to those things? Yeah,
there's a tension there. Do you remember when everybody was clamoring to hear Albini's recording of In on the Kill Taker?
Yeah, by Fugazi. Yes. So
producer, let me
engineer
cut that out of the recording. Imagine I never said that. It never came out of my mouth. Recording engineer Steve Albini recorded Fugazi's In on the Kill Taker, and I'm looking behind you at your Fugazi and shellac poster, and
Chicago. In Chicago in 1998.
Remembering those shows together as being the most exciting, monumental, incredible series of shows. The Makeup, Blonde Redhead, like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it never was released. And I wanted to hear that record so badly. And I finally did. Well past its sort of cultural moments. And I was kind of like, it's cool.
Yeah,
I see why they made the decision they did.
Yeah, so to clarify for those who aren't familiar with this story, Fugazi uncharacteristically sought to record a record with, they've been making records with other people before, but they went down to see Steve Albini in Chicago, and based on a conversation that Ian MacKaye and Steve had on, and I had on this show, it was revealed as the session failed, basically. It was deemed a failure. Things didn't sound right. And by Steve's admission, they were just having too much fun. He was having too much fun socially and didn't concentrate on his work. The band subsequently re-recorded the album with a different group of people, engineer and producer. And that's the one that eventually came out. So I just want to clarify that what Mark was clamoring for was ostensibly a demo recording. Well, it wasn't intended to be, but it became known as like the Albini demos. Sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to contextualize.
And how does that relate to Bob Dylan? For me, that was something that I would go to any lengths to hear that recording. I don't have that same relationship, and it's an interesting position to be in, because I know a lot of people. I mean, Dylan is the most bootlegged artist, I think, in popular music history.
That's what that's mentioned in the book several times, that whatever the Recording Academy or whatever says, that he's the most bootlegged. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Parker and I know the folks who do the armpit recordings. Like we have interacted with them. We the unseemly characters who are
tapers,
are very close friends. Yeah. Yes, tapers, who have become sort of the documentarians of a moment, a really important set of documentarians. In fact, in the Bob Dylan Center, we have, because of one of these tapers, the last performance that Mike Bloomfield ever did with Bob Dylan shortly before his death, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
To get to your question about every so often more things come out, at some point that's finite. At some point, the materials that exist are finite, and there are just things that weren't recorded, but there's still a lot there. But it's a living artist who has a whole team around him who are releasing things that are deemed worthy by that artist. But I think people want everything. People just want everything, every second of every recording, and I understand that impulse.
But it's overwhelming. Like, you cited a Fugazi artifact that was clamored for, but it's ostensibly one thing.
Yeah.
With Dylan, it's just such an avalanche, and I myself can't keep up with all of it. Like,
I was just gonna say, the only artist that I know, like, and certainly not this way anymore, but the only, maybe there's an aging population that's like this. I wish there were more, but Charlie Parker, right?
Yeah.
People wanted to hear every note he played, right? Every note, whether he was, out of his mind on drugs or playing the best he could play. But that's the only other artist that I can really think of where people really wanted to hear every single note. And Charlie Parker, very finite. He dies, there's like really like 10, a little more, I guess there's, well, whatever. There's a finite amount of material, 15, 20 years.
I imagine people could make arguments about Miles Davis or Frank Zappa along the same lines, like people like that, where they have this ardent fan base and the artist was prolific and temperamental and ingenious, right? Like, so there's like with Dylan and what you guys have done with the archive and with all the materials that have been gathered with the bootleg series. And as I recall, in terms of the intent of the center itself, which was to inspire people to try things, to tap into their imaginations and not be afraid of where that takes them. This is an artist, in Dylan's case in particular, where the process does matter to us. And I think, Parker, were you saying earlier that here's a guy where he's going through a seemingly just an informal warm-up in the studio, but he's singing like that's his last performance ever. Like his process oriented, jotting things down in his notebook or whatever, it all has such great intention and it seems so purposeful that it does have merit. It's not a lark. I'm putting a lot of words in your mouth, but does that resonate with you, Parker?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think that's exactly it, right? Yeah. Like, look at the rehearsals specifically that are on, Trouble No More, Bootleg 13, or in Springtime in New York. Like, that's just him in the rehearsal studio. And, he is take after take, rehearsing the band, but singing, he'll go off mic. Those are like some of like the street legal stuff, like where he's, there's a mic there. He doesn't want this kind of, he knows that it could get, at a certain point, he knows that stuff gets out there. Right. Yeah. And that people are, going to try and bootleg stuff. So you can tell, I don't want this. I'm now off mic and I'm singing off mic and, you're not going to be able to hear it. But there is a great intentionality or it can seem like that until you see the scope of everything, right? Like if you go into the archive and you ask to see the stuff for or let's choose a different album. So that, because we talked about that period a lot. Let's say, I don't know.
You know what? Because you're bringing
New Morning.
Well, we could do that. I actually want to get to Tempest for a second, or that era, because Mark earlier suggested that the initial archive is basically the beginning to Tempest and then subsequent.
Right.
Anyway, what I have found and what we have found is that I think, I don't know if it's modern times onward or there just seems to be less extraneous reject stuff in the last couple of about the last decade and a half, let's say. Mark, is that true? Like, is there anything that you've come across from the latter? When I say latter, I mean anything since Love and Theft. Like some of that's been captured on Telltale Signs and whatnot, but like the sort of other recordings. But is it starting to slow down? Are the albums basically everything? That's my read on it. Sorry, Mark. Is that your read on it too? Is there extra stuff that we haven't heard?
Parker was gonna.
Yeah, I'll just, because it finishes my previous thought, which is that, well, sometimes, yes, there are outtakes that from, not many, but there are some outtakes. The biggest thing I was going to say is that, like, the archive didn't, like, if you asked to pull the box from Tempest, let's say, right, you're going to get all the different songs, you're going to get the notepads, but that's just what could be identified as those songs, right? Like, there are several, I don't know how many boxes it is, Mark, of stuff that, like, we don't, we know it's a general time frame-ish because of the handwriting, but we don't know where or what or when, this material was created. It's just like a sea of stuff. And for the book, we identified like a whole lot, because if you're going through it with that level of detail and researchers go through and they can pick things out and little by little, it's sort of, getting a little bit less, that pile.
Yes.
But like that sort of dispels that idea of intentionality, that like everything is deliberate, right? I mean, it's very clear though, that whenever the moment strikes, Dylan is finding a pen or a typewriter or whatever, and he's going at it, right? Like, because you can find stuff on the back of business cards. You can find stuff on the back of matchbooks. You can find stuff, on all kinds of little scraps of paper. And so it is like, we've been saying, like, Dylan follows his muse wherever it goes. It's like there is that desire, but it's not necessarily as intentional in sort of a process. Like the process can sort of take, different.
Yeah, sometimes it's lightning in the bottle and the song comes out fully formed. Other times it takes 30 verses before he picks the 5 or 6. I'm not saying there's a hard and fast rule, but I wonder if that impulse to be as prolific as possible for a batch of songs is starting to lessen. That's all I was trying to get at. Like, I don't get the sense he's recording 20 songs for Tempest.
I am curious about what materials there might be for the songs, lyric drafts and the like for Rough and Rowdy Ways.
Yeah.
I want to say, though, that it's a very odd existence. And I was just thinking about this, that I can't think of another artist that people need to know so much about. Like, I need to hear every outtake. I'm disappointed in the book because I didn't get every lyric draft of, whatever song, or I've seen this photograph before. I need something different. I need something new. And that's not abating. Like that desire to know Dylan it's not relegated to people who are aging out of existence. And here's my point. I've got a weird job. I mean, it's such a, I don't understand why people aren't sending me more checks in the mail. But here's the thing, like, dated back to the earliest years of his career, but certainly when, Great White Wonder, people digging through his garbage, people, saying he's the prophet, the Messiah, the voice of a generation, and all of that sort of thing. And then it is the bootleg series. It's the Dance of the Seven Veils. It's the providing the people with almost what they want, but not everything. And it's that interplay between those two things that I think has sustained that kind of, that desire.
Well, and I think the desire is steeped in disbelief. I can't believe how great this guy is. There must be more to it. There must be more to this guy, and I don't quite understand. I know that fandom is an interesting thing, and everyone's got their own way of processing an artist, but those of us who follow Dylan, I think, can't believe it. I can't believe we're walking among this guy, that he's around, that this is the kind of work. So I think that is part of why the disbelief creates fervor. I want to believe, I believe in him, but I can't believe it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's outside of normal fandom. I mean, yes. There, you could go back and point to any number of popular boy bands going back to, the 80s or beyond that, where there is such a fervent fan base. But that's different than artistry and depth of productivity and even the use of the word genius. I don't know. I don't think, though, I'm sure there are people who would disagree with me, but I don't think our desire to get close to Dylan and his work is based on carnality as much as, or like visceral whatever feelings. Like it is, and I'm not trying to sound snobby or whatever, but it's like an intellectual, emotional hybrid of a connection that's very hard to articulate. It's not always. It's gritty, too. It's not like you put on, I love the Beatles, for example, and the feeling you get from early to mid-60s Beatles is definitely a pleasant one. It's like a warmth, and then as they got grittier, you're like, this still is amazing, but it's making me feel differently than it used to. Whereas if I think on Dylan, it's always been truth and harsh reality with romance and hope. Sorry, guys. Now I'm just talking about Dylan. I'm mindful of the time, and I don't want to push us too much further. And it's an interesting point because I want to get into finality, the finality that I feel we're all going through with Bob right now. Because you guys made a book
he's alive. There's more stuff that's going to come at some point, as we've alluded to. But you created this book. It's frozen now, and it takes us from the beginning of his life to Rough and Rowdy Ways and a photo shoot in 2023 where he looks fucking badass as hell. And so there's that part of it. I got to, as you may know, I got to attend 3 Rough and Rowdy Ways shows. And after the third one, I wrote about this. A friend and I had a dialogue. Friends and I were having a dialogue, and my friend Mick sort of was like, have you actually looked at the set list and thought about it more? And we were like, it's a weird set list, kind of, isn't it? Like, it's a lot of Rough and Rowdy Ways. And he's like, if you actually look at it, I think he's singing to us. I think he's singing songs of gratitude to us, his audience, and songs of gratitude to his muses. And he's changing lyrics to songs, and he's sort of talking about leaving. He's sort of talking about saying goodbye and thank you at the same time. And I know we don't have the set list in front of us, gentlemen, but I just want to say, when my friend said this and I studied it, I'm like, I think there's something to this. So what I want to get at, and it's an emotional subject, but do you have a sense in your own mind, beyond the age, beyond the fact that he's in his early 80s right now, and you know, at some point he will stop doing stuff. Did you write this book and put this book out now thinking we're close to the end of Mark? No, not at all. Okay, you're shaking your head.
No, that I and I'll let Parker speak to it. The book started in 2017, and I think we had all hoped that it might be done for the, was it initial 2021 opening of the Bob Dylan Center. I mean, everything just got pushed.
Right.
We always knew that there would be pieces unwritten of the story if we were to publish now, but there was plenty there.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was why. I mean, the book ends with the spring tour in Japan, earlier this year, because that was literally as we were going to press, that tour ended. I think he was maybe in the middle of the next tour, but it felt like we can't, leave you midway through. Maybe we should have. Yeah. And it would have given the sense that this is an ongoing thing. But that was, it was sort of just the circumstances of how the book came to be, that it, it's not supposed to be the final word. And I think.
But do you see where I'm coming from a little bit? Just that the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour, this is all part of the clamoring and the obsession. It was pointed out in the last few months, like, wait a minute, this tour has an end date. It says 2021 to 2024. And then as you process the set list, you're like, he's kind of going through his life and singing to his muses and singing to us. Do you see where I'm coming from a little bit, Parker? Like, there is this, do you have this feeling at all that he's starting to wind down?
Not really. No. He feels, not to say that that's not, like, I think that's a totally valid sort of interpretation. Eventually that will happen, but I guess given the track record of the last 60 years, I just like, I have no expectations, right?
Okay.
That's just sort of, where I'm at.
Yeah. The other thing, Dylan doesn't like the term never ending tour, yada, yada. We know about that.
Yeah,
and he wrote the funny notes about, each of these tours could have been, a year long and given, various titles, and
funny
we
titles
have that in the book. And this maybe sort of feels, I mean, a 3-year tour with one name, to me, he tends to not do the same thing over and over and over again for too long. So, I mean, maybe that is a perfectly acceptable time for him to be touring Rough and Rowdy Ways.
I think if you ponder... Sorry, guys, I'm not going to let this go because I have an emotional connection to this guy. But even as you ponder what he's singing about on the album Rough and Rowdy Ways, it's a lot of like reflecting upon who I contain multitudes. I ain't no false. If you listen to False Prophet, like I'm the last of the best. You can bury the rest. Like something's going on, and maybe we'll never know, and maybe things will just sort of things are going to occur as they occur. I'm just saying. reading your book was a very emotional experience for me because I'm having a very emotional time with this guy I love deeply and whose music I love deeply. And having attended those shows and feeling like something was up with this set list. Like, why did he pick these songs? Why has he changed lyrics to certain songs the way he has? Like, what do these new lyrics mean? Even the cover songs that he has chosen that I've heard anyway seem to speak to the passage of time and things moving on and things like that. So didn't mean to put you on the spot, but this is it's a historical document about a contemporary figure who I think has always been telling us things. And I'm just trying to listen more to what he's saying as opposed to projecting what I think he's saying, which we all tend to do. Just like, here's what he's saying. Right. Here's why you know what I'm getting at?
That's part of the like fandom of Bob Dylan, right? Yeah. In a way, with somebody, we jokingly said that, you know, if that we should call this, you know, Mixing Up the Medicine Volume 1 and, you know, the Style of Chronicles Volume 1 or the Complete Album Collection Volume 1 or so I guess like in my head, maybe that's way I see Rough and Rowdy Ways Tour 2021 to 2024 is like, you know, Volume 1 kind of thing. Yeah. But certainly the preoccupation with like, you know, the Rough and Rowdy Ways like is very elegaic and like, you know, speaks to that and you know, but it also reflects in some of the, at least musically, the timelessness, like those, you know, Great American Songbook, you know, songs that he chose to interpret. Yeah, I don't know. There's no way to definitively say either way. I just am seeking some like-minded people's opinions. And I know you...
Vish, I appreciate you talking about Bob Dylan and your feelings about this because I like you as a person and it's really, I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, it was really important what you were just saying. Important to me personally.
I appreciate that you like me as a person. That's all I'm picking up on so far. That's nice. I like you too. You seem like a nice guy. I like your cat.
It's the only way I can keep him quiet is occasional scratchings. But Parker had the good fortune of traveling back to Brooklyn to see Bob on this tour. I wasn't.
Right.
I mean, I'm already regretting it for the rest of my life. But Parker, what was your sense of the gig?
Yeah, I didn't have the same sort of it didn't strike me in the same way that it struck Vish. But Vish also saw 3 shows, right?
I saw 3 shows that are pretty much the exact same set. I was trying to process just the one, right? Like, yeah. I was just trying to take in. I hadn't seen. It was like a fairly long period other than the pandemic. Of not seeing. It was the first time I was seeing a lot of that Rough and Rowdy Ways material reworked, rearranged from the way it was in 2021. And yeah, so I think some of that was just me trying to like take in that first pass and maybe with, some re-listening, some of those resonances would strike me a little bit more. I think singing, I made up my mind to give myself to you. Like, what's the, sorry, I'm going to paraphrase this. I give myself to you, I am, from Salt Lake City to Birmingham, from East LA to San Antonio. I don't want to live my life alone. How is that not about being on the road and touring and being with your audience who love you? To be alone with you has changed. I'll Be Your Baby Tonight. So many songs in the set are about singing songs, are about writing songs, about what it's been like to do that. I'm going to cry in a moment. Sorry, I'm keeping myself...
This is a safe space.
I'm keeping myself together. There's just so much that I, like a Dylan knucklehead, have now read into about why are these songs the ones he's chosen? What is Watching the River Flow? How can a set begin with, what's the matter with me? I ain't got much to say at this point, Like at this point, and then spend an hour and a half with a guy who has so much to say, but is maybe saying, I don't have that much more to say. Like, that's where I'm coming from. I've said a lot. I've done a lot. Mother of Muses, sing to me, like thanking his muses, I think with some sense of, I've done it. Whatever I was looking for. What does Reuben Hurricane Carter say in your book? Is paraphrased as saying numerous times. Have you found it, Bob? Have you found it? I think he's starting to tell us he found it. And that's where I'm coming from. And that is swimming around in how I read your book recently. I read your book subsequent to these shows. As you both know, it took a weird journey to get this book to my house in Edmonton. So I didn't get a chance to dig in. And now that I have, it's an emotional swirl for me. And everyone who wrote an essay I relate to. I will say, like, every essay speaks to me as people touch and feel this guy's actual writing and his work and his thoughts. So sorry to be all emo, but I'm just saying I am trying to look at this with my eyes wide open about what this guy is telling us with the songs of all the songs he could pick to play on this tour and play them consistently every night. I don't think I'm being a lunatic and saying there's something to that, what he's chosen and why it's pretty much static and why everyone's getting kind of equal treatment in every city except for a few covers and very minor modifications. But I'm telling you guys, he's singing with great gratitude. And that fact that Mother of Muses was for a while surrounded by a cover song by Leonard Cohen, by the Grateful Dead, by whomever. That Old Black Magic is one of those cover songs. There's some real strategic, I think, thoughtfulness going on in how he's talking. Sorry, guys, I can't stop talking about this now.
No. I mean, look, I think as we've been talking about this entire time, Dylan's not one to fake it, right? He's not gonna. So I think that, I think that that's a very real thing you're feeling. He's not gonna go out and do the same set list night after night if it's not working. He has to connect with that material and over to put it over. And so everything you're hearing in it is real.
Well, also reading Ray Padgett's book, Pledging My Time, when it gets to the Rough and Rowdy Ways stuff, which is, as we're speaking, this is Bob Dylan's most recent album. Almost everyone involved in the album that Ray is able to talk to says, more or less, yeah, he called me out of the blue. I haven't worked with him in 15, 20, 30 years. He called me in to just play a little piano on something. He called me in to contribute to something, and I haven't talked to him. That to me is a guy doing some stock taking and being a little sentimental, at least a little sentimental. I'm going to call someone I haven't worked with since 1978. I'm throwing out a year. Forgive me if that's inaccurate, but I'm telling you.
No, Alan Pasqua.
Yeah, Alan Pasqua. So what I'm telling you, and he gets him to play on the Nobel Prize speech, improvised piano. I think he's thinking about what he's done and who he's worked with and who's meant something. The fucking Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers Farm Aid thing. So for those who don't know, this year, Dylan shows up at Farm Aid unannounced with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Who does he play with at the first time he ever played Farm Aid in 1985? Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I'm telling you, there's a thing. Sorry, I sound like a lunatic now. Mark's probably regretting that he said he liked me because I sound so deranged. But I'm telling you, there's a real method to this that I think we should be paying attention to. He's in a zone where he's trying to pay tribute to us, the people that have inspired him musically, the songwriters he loves, all the name checks on Rough and Rowdy Ways. Those are all foundational people and events for him. And I think he's thinking about that as he contemplates that being maybe his last big artistic statement and this tour being his last big tour. So, Mark, I don't mean to fill you with more regret for not going to Brooklyn, but I want to tell you your book is part of this book going from whatever point A in Bob Dylan's life is to whatever his point Z is, or Z as you say in America. I think it's an emotional and hefty tome, and I want to thank you for it. And I hope what I'm saying, Mark, gives you some pause as to where Dylan might be and what you've done and what you're doing to contribute to his legacy. Does that make any sense?
Well, thank you. I will take it. I was immediate. Yeah. I immediately regretted what I said earlier, and I was reminded of
Wait, about liking me? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yes, there was I was a big Beatles and John Lennon fan growing up, and there was a guy who had jumped the fence at Tittenhurst. And,
that guy.
Came up to him and was talking about how it all fits, man. It all fits. And I was just having one of those moments.
I'm sorry, can you guys hear me okay? Is the crinkling of my tinfoil hat getting onto the mic too loud?
Of course it fits. Everything fits. If you're tripping off on some trip, everything fits. Yeah. I am sure you were right.
I don't want to be right. It's a sad thing to be right about, but it hit me both during that last show at Massey Hall that I got to see in Toronto and in the subsequent conversation with, again, my friends Mick and Steve. It crystallized like, oh, I haven't had a second to really think about what these shows mean to me. I've just been letting them come to me in Rochester, New York, just sitting there, seeing a guy I've seen so many times and just feeling grateful that I get to. And that happened in the first night in Toronto too. But by the third night, because it was my last tickets for this tour that I had, and I don't know, as we're speaking, I don't know what's happening, if there's going to be more or what. Yeah. You can't help it when an artist you love is getting older. You can't help but wonder how much longer they're going to go. But I do think he's telling us some stuff. That's all I'm getting at.
And he wouldn't be the kind of person, I don't think, to say this is Bob Dylan's farewell tour.
No,
2025.
No, but the clamoring for tickets was equal to that. I would say it was very hard. I've never had trouble getting tickets to see Bob Dylan, like since I've started to see him, and this was difficult, like more difficult. So I think everyone is feeling like this is probably it. What I'm saying is, I thought
you were going to say it's because of our book.
It is because of your book, yes, and the center. Okay. Yeah, there's obviously renewed interest in seeing him. Before we go, and I'm sorry, I've kept us over here. I know some of you have things to do. Probably a question you get all the time. Dylan's engagement himself. I know Dylan has people we know, all of us on this call know. You reach out to Dylan's camp, and there's certain people you talk to about, would Bob want to do this, or can we do this with Bob's stuff? Just to catch up people who don't know. Has Dylan been to the center yet? And was he engaged, to your knowledge, personally, with anything that you've been working on with this book or anything else going on with the center? Going to go to, Mark is already shaking his head, so I don't like the answer, but I'm going to go to Parker first. Parker, any Dylan engagement with this work?
No, not to my knowledge. It is fully authorized, so it went through, Dylan's people, but not to our knowledge. And no, Dylan has not. The last time he came through Tulsa was just prior to the center actually opening to the public, and apparently he went to a Tulsa Drillers game. They're the AA minor league baseball team for the LA Dodgers that are just down the street. So he drove past the Bob Dylan Center, but did not stop.
How does that make you feel, Parker?
I don't really have any opinion one way or another about it. I would find it more surprising if he were sort of engaged with the center or the past, or, just going through the archive. Some people take, like, I guess he did it with Hank. Well, they were unfinished songs, Hank Williams or whatever. And we know the story about what became Mermaid Avenue and how, Dylan was supposed to get first crack at those songs. He's done it with other people's work, I guess, but he's not someone who's going to like go back to his old work and finish it, or go through the archive to like find things. So yeah, I would have more feelings if he like did that, to sort of be focused on the horizon line. It makes more sense to be.
Yeah. Adjacent to the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa is the Woody Guthrie Center. And I got there's an intimation in your book, Mark, that Dylan has visited the Woody Guthrie Center. Is that correct?
Yeah. That was before my time in Tulsa, but shortly after the archive was sold, Dylan played in Tulsa, and he dropped by the Woody Guthrie Center. So the Woody Guthrie Archive, Bob Dylan Archive, Phil Oakes Archive, Tom Paxton, Cynthia Gooding, the Library of Harry Smith, and the Library of Izzy Young, some other small collections. All of those were acquired by the George Kaiser Family Foundation here in Tulsa, which is a philanthropic organization that does a ton for early childhood education, civic engagement, issues around prisons and recovery and women. And so this was one piece of their much larger initiative for Tulsa. And so Bob played and came and from my understanding met a handful of folks, like only a few from the George Kaiser Family Foundation, George Kaiser. And the story I was told was he was expecting, I think, that it was like a photo op or something. And instead the center was empty and it was just a few folks and Dylan was able to look around at things and invite, members off the tour bus to come and check things out. And I think it was an enjoyable experience.
Okay, nice. So him visiting the center, I don't know. It could happen, but thus far, no doubt.
He's welcome to.
I know he listens to the show, Bob. Consider this an open invitation. No, I'm kidding. No, that would be lovely. So
I was going to say, one of the cool things when you're thinking about is that the Guthrie has the doors from Huntington where Dylan would go to visit Guthrie. So they were if you think about a strange thing, imagine showing Dylan, these are the doors from Huntington that you used to,
Greystone. Yeah.
Greystone.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. When he had Huntington's disease. Yes.
Sorry. Yes.
Yes. And I mean, I think in the book, as I recall, Dylan is particularly taken with the fact that some of Woody's paintings are on display, and he's like, Woody painted that? Am I getting that right? I think that's right.
That was from a particular notebook called, we have some of his paintings on display. One of Lincoln, that's owned by the Smithsonian, a couple that were not known to exist until in the last 18 months or 2 years or so. A couple of portraits. This was from a book called Ouija Woody, and it was a notebook that he was particularly taken with.
Yeah. Well, it's telling, I think, that he was keen to check out the Woody Guthrie Center, and I hope at some point he does. From what I understand, and I don't know who told me this, the last time Dylan was in Tulsa since the opening of the center, the Bob Dylan Center, Tony Garnier from his band maybe walked through. Band members have walked through, but he didn't. So the likelihood of him wanting to do it some other time is probably low. But I just want to say it's a remarkable thing you guys are working on there. So thank you for doing it. Real quick check, how's it doing? I mean, I was there when it was the grand opening, and it was busy among the people who were invited to come. Mark, is it doing particularly well, the Bob Dylan Center?
Yes. These figures, I can't vouch for their accuracy because I'm doing it off the top of my head. We've had, since we opened, or maybe it was just this year, more than 50,000 visitors.
Wow.
More than 30 countries from around the world. I think over 40% of our visitors this year, I believe, are international. It's been really great for the city of Tulsa in particular. It's been a wonderful opportunity to be able to show off the stuff and tell cool stories and inspire people of their own creativity and capacity. Yeah.
And just to keep it on the Chicago tip, I think I recently saw that Wilco swung by and did a tour of the center. Is that right? Yes.
They came through while they were on tour. We gave them a book. So hopefully that wasn't left in Tucson or someplace. It still exists somewhere, but
I think I have their copy. It just took a circuitous route to get to me. I'm just kidding.
They did play in Cincinnati. Yeah. So,
That's where the book was at one point, and we were all three of us here trying to figure out where the hell my book was, and we found it was in Cincinnati just hanging out with Dwight Yoakam or something like that. Anyway, it's I'm so happy for you guys. I've already intimated what I think might be next for Bob Dylan in a morbid way. What's next for you guys and the center? Parker, any big plans coming up beyond getting the word out about this book, and anything you can speak to?
Next year, I've been doing this. Hopefully, it will come out. I've been doing this 3 LP box set with a record label called Vinyl Me Please, all about the Chelsea Hotel. So that's the next thing on my radar.
Oh, for you, okay.
For me, for early 2024. Yeah, and I know Mark's got this incredible exhibition coming up in February.
I'm working on a few exhibitions. I'm working on one called How Many Roads? Bob Dylan and His Changing Times, 1961 to 1964, which will talk a little bit about the politics of the era, very fraught politics from, civil rights, anti-war, Red Scare, sort of talking about what was happening and Dylan's place in it, not as a savior figure, but as a, young 20-year-old kid sort of navigating his times, becoming politically and culturally aware and what that sort of window meant. I'm also working on an exhibition about Victor Jara, Chilean folk singer, and Phil Oakes, which we have a Phil Oakes notebook from 1971 when he went to Chile and met Victor Jara, and we have been developing an exhibition around that moment, which I'm very excited about. I have a question for you, Vish.
Mm-hmm.
What comes out sooner? A new Dylan record or the new Shellac record?
Oh, a new Shellac record.
Okay, all right. Well,
we learned that on this. Did you catch this episode?
I was halfway through it yesterday as I was doing holiday shopping. Yes. Well,
if all has gone well, this past week, Shellac will have a finally. You should listen to, thank you for listening to the show and engaging with the show. Mark, I appreciate that. And Parker, Parker, do you listen to the show? You listen to the show. You've heard the show, right?
I pop in from time to time. I know you like that Tim reissue. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, we could talk about that too, but we're running out of time. No, I do like that a lot. My point is, you will hear, Mark, it's the last thing I think we talked about really is the strange saga of the new Shellac album. But spoiler alert, if all has gone well, they should finally, after attempting to have many test pressings that had some failure or another, Steve was quite confident that by last week, as we're speaking, by last week, they should have had the artwork's done, everything's done. There was just some pressing issues. Pressing plant issues. So yeah, it's coming. I think it'll be out in 2024. I see no reason why it wouldn't be unless there was some fiasco with the most recent test pressing. So Dylan, I stand by my theory that Rough and Rowdy Ways might be the last album. That I think he made some real concluding statements on it. I don't want to say that, but I think I'm going to stand by that, sadly. I hope that doesn't bum you out, Mark.
No.
Okay. Thank you for the question. I will link to various things about the book and the Bob Dylan Center in the show notes, so I want people to click on those things. But if there's anywhere else you'd like people to web destinations that people should know about, Mark, is there anything you'd like to point people to?
Certainly check out the Woody Guthrie Center as well, our sibling museum, sibling center. And, come to Tulsa. It's pretty great. I enjoyed
it very much. I want to come back. And
you should.
I want to come back because I feel like even though in the course of my days there, I went to the center every single day, I think there's more I could have asked about, or I didn't even deign to be like, hey, can I learn more about Time Out of Mind? Like, I just didn't even think to ask. I just looked at, you guys brought me in and it didn't occur to me to be like, yeah, this is great. Show me more. I didn't want to be a jerk. So knowing that this is the experience that other people had, I would like to come back and focus in on some things. It's just, again, I don't mean to impose or assume that would be welcome, but it is a regret that I'm like, oh shit, I could have asked more questions and asked to see more stuff, and maybe they would have accommodated it based on everyone else's experience in this book. Because guys, you flew me all the way out there. I assume you wouldn't have minded if I had said, do you think I could just see some stuff from this? I'm sure you would have been like, yeah, we can. Maybe I'm wrong. Sorry. Parker, would you have been like, get the hell out of here, buddy. Go back to Canada. The nerve.
No, you've been more than welcome.
I do want to come.
You're still more than welcome. So
thank you. I hope I can return someday when we're all there at some point. Parker, similar question. Any web destinations you'd like people to know about beyond the stuff about the book and the center?
No. I just would, direct them to Tulsa to visit the center. We, besides Mark's new exhibit, well, there's an exhibition up on about, that sort of expands upon the book. You can see a lot of the materials that are in the book on display right now. Mark has the new one he talked about covering 61 to 64. We have a new program in the micro cinema. Mm-hmm. So a whole new set of clips. It's really great. We've got some things in the works for the digital jukebox as well. And, and like, just as we were all attesting, like, I haven't met anybody who's gone down to Tulsa who hasn't like left charmed by it.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful place to spend a few days and explore. And, every time I go, I've been going since about 2016, 2017, there's, that much more happening.
Yeah.
So come and be part of the excitement and the
very historical place for all sorts of great and awful reasons. But I think you should go learn all about that too. And Mark, is when I was there was a Sonic Youth themed restaurant. Is that still there?
Chimera Cafe has Sonic Youth themed tacos and food there. I wonder, I think Lee Ranaldo, when he was here, experienced those. I'm not entirely sure.
I texted him about it while I was there eating from it, and I texted him photos of the menu, and I believe he was aware of it. Yeah.
I wonder. That would be the ultimate. Somebody there being rude to him and him going, "Do you know who I am? I'm responsible for the name of your tacos." So,
I'm sure.
Anyway.
No, they were all very nice, and I want to thank you endlessly again. On an infinite loop. Thank you for bringing me to Tulsa, and I also encourage everyone to visit the city and the Bob Dylan Center. Well, listen. Mark, Parker, thank you so much for returning to this show and for the lovely experiences you've given to me personally and for getting me this book. And it's really, I can't recommend it highly enough. I wish you both the best of luck in the future. And I hope we talk soon when Bob Dylan Mixing Up the Medicine Volume 2 is released. Thanks again.
Thank you, Vish.
Thanks so much, Vish.
Oh, very special thanks again to Mark and Parker, the editors of this great new book, Bob Dylan Mixing Up the Medicine. I hope you enjoyed our chat. I did. It's really fun talking to those guys. It's nice that life has brought us together. I think we all have a little mutual affection for one another, so it's nice. In this case, they're back on the show, and in this case, it's the 828th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available wherever you get your podcast, pretty much. If you can't find an episode that you're looking for, or if you want to learn more about me and sign up for my monthly newsletter, please visit vishkhanna.com. You can also like or follow Creative Control on various social media platforms. There's a Linktree link in the show notes, and if you click on that, you can find me on whatever is still available. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on Instagram at vishkhanna, and I'm on Twitter at vishkhanna, and Vish Creative is where you can find the podcast on Twitter. But like I say, go to the Linktree, figure out what you want to follow me on, and I'll follow you back probably. We'll see what happens. I don't know. Also, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to really and truly sustain this podcast. It's a weird, as I'm speaking to you, a weird zone. I need to get that Patreon up if I want the show to continue, if I want to be able to do the work I've been doing. It's getting harder to do it. I don't have a lot of time, and I'd love to have the time. And time is money. You don't know what, I'm just going to spout a bunch of cliches at the end of this, but I could use, if I have more money, I have more time, I guess is the way to put it. $6 or more a month gets you access to exclusive content, and also you get the episodes earlier than everybody else. There's lots of little perks there, so please visit patreon.com/Creative Control. And if you believe in this show and wish it was around for a long time, support the show today. Thank you so much. Also want to thank the wonderful Alberta Record Store Blackbird Music, which has locations in Edmonton and Calgary, Alberta. And you can order things directly from their site at blackbird.ca. Also want to thank Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee, respectively, in Guelph, Ontario, and Granddad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario, for their in-kind support for this show. They've all been supporting this show a long time, so thanks to them. Also want to thank Jim Guthrie, who's been supporting me a long time, too, as a friend. You can learn more about Jim at jimguthrie.org and listen to the wonderful music that he makes and even provides for this show. And finally, thank you for listening to this episode with Mark and Parker. Pick up this book, Bob Dylan, Mixing Up the Medicine. It's amazing, essential for any Bob Dylan fan. And check out the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma the next time you're there. Otherwise, I will talk to you very soon. Thanks again. Bye for now.